All right, let's just dive right into this explainer. If you've ever found yourself suddenly realizing you just lost an entire hour to the infinite scroll, maybe going down a 45-minute Wikipedia rabbit hole about, I don't know, deep-sea squids, and you're just sitting there wondering where your day went, well, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're tackling exactly why we're constantly glued to our screens, and more importantly, how we can redesign our days from the ground up to break that cycle completely. We are going to build a routine so engaging, you won't even have time for the algorithm.
We really need to start with a massive paradigm shift here. Honestly, absolve yourself of the guilt right now. You aren't fundamentally broken, and you're probably not hopelessly addicted. Your phone is just filling the dead moments, those awkward pauses and gaps in an underdesigned, kind of boring day. And it's going to keep filling that gap until we actively build something better to replace it.
Which brings us to Section 1, the first 90 minutes, and how setting the tone for your day changes everything.
So how do we actually start building that better day? Well, the hard science behind your morning energy actually comes down to something called the cortisol awakening response. Basically, this is a physiological flood of alert, focused energy that your brain experiences right after waking up. You are literally wired by human biology to be highly engaged first thing in the morning. So please, whatever you do, don't hand that golden hour over to someone else's internet drama. When you check your phone the second you open your eyes, you're essentially declaring everyone else's life more important than your own.
Instead of reaching for that screen, try following a simple morning reset protocol. It's just 3 steps. First, put your phone out of arm's reach before bed. I know, it sounds painful, but small physical friction shifts behavior way faster than motivation ever will. Second, get some sunlight in the first 10 minutes. Just step outside or stand by a window. It triggers your circadian rhythm and programs your body for energy instead of that awful brain fog. And third, drink water before you even think about coffee. Your body just fasted for 8 hours, so rehydration is absolutely critical for your focus.
Now, if you want a great way to process your own thoughts before the world gets to you, there's this fascinating decades-old practice called morning pages. You basically just wake up, grab a notebook, and write 3 pages of stream of consciousness just to clear out your mental cache. You see, most of us spend our whole lives as walking compilations of other people's ideas. But this practice gives your brain that healthy stimulation it's hungry for, processing your own unfiltered thoughts instead of just passively consuming random opinions.
Moving right along to Section 2, micro-adventures and filling those daytime gaps.
So as we get into the midday stretch, we really need to replace those empty transitions, like waiting for a meeting to start or standing in line for coffee, with actual meaningful engagement. And there is a massive difference here between digital novelty and real novelty. Digital novelty, like the infinite scroll, is basically just empty calories. Sure, it stimulates you in the moment, but it drains you. It creates this dependency that leaves you weaker but constantly wanting more. Real novelty, on the other hand, is what your brain's evolutionary biology is actually craving. It genuinely satisfies you, it builds mental strength, and it actually creates growth.
So how do we get that real novelty? Well, here's a fun little menu of 5 micro-adventures. They all take under 10 minutes and act as super healthy alternatives to scrolling. You could write a quick flash fiction story to train your creativity. You could go on a texture hunt, literally just finding and touching 5 different surfaces around you. You could create a soundscape journal by simply closing your eyes and listing every single sound you hear. How about writing a daily haiku about whatever is sitting right in front of you? Or, my personal favorite, sketching badly, which forces you to actually look at familiar things instead of just blindly glancing past them.
To show you just how effective this is, one creator who tried that texture hunt noted, "I noticed the grain in my cutting board for the first time." Think about that. They had used that exact same cutting board every single day for years. We all kind of go through life half asleep, missing the details right in front of us. These micro-adventures, they wake you up.
But before we go any further into optimizing our day, we really have to pause and ask ourselves a pretty tough question about how we're setting up our daily lives and our physical spaces. Are you relying on discipline instead of design? Like, are you just white-knuckling it, trying to willpower your way out of a bad habit? Because, I'll be honest with you, if you are, it's just not going to last.
That leads us perfectly into Section 3, Environment and Breaks, where we'll look at designing out distraction.
To really take back control, you have to accept a hard truth. Environment beats willpower. Every single time. Look, phones are engineered by billionaires specifically to capture your attention. So you have to design a space that defends it. 30 is your magic number here. Do a quick time audit. Track what you're doing every 30 minutes for 3 consecutive days and just note how you felt. Doing this is going to help you pinpoint your specific scroll holes, like that 2 p.m. post-lunch slump where 40 minutes just magically vanish into thin air. Once you know exactly when you're vulnerable, you can actually prepare for it.
We also have to stop relying on depleting breaks. Switching from active work on your computer to passive scrolling on your phone isn't actually rest, it's fake rest. It tricks your brain, but ultimately just drains your energy. Instead, we need to shift to restorative breaks. These are the kinds of breaks that actually refill your biological energy reserves, help you integrate ideas, and leave you fundamentally better off than before you stopped working.
So what does a restorative break actually look like in practice? Well, here are 3 ways to do it. First, movement. Just put on one song and dance around, or do a quick stretch. In literally 3 minutes, your brain chemistry changes. Second, sensory. Make a cup of tea, but actually watch the water boil. Notice the steam, feel the warmth of the mug in your hands. Or third, simply daydream. Deliberately schedule some totally unstructured time. Unfocused time is exactly where your brain processes experiences and consolidates everything you've been learning.
All right, let's jump to section 4, the evening loop, because tonight builds tomorrow.
You see, your morning and your evening aren't separate, isolated things. They're a continuous cycle. The evening scroll hole is usually the deepest one of the day, and borrowing cheap dopamine tonight is going to cost you dearly tomorrow morning. So to make sure you don't wake up exhausted, try this 3-part evening checklist. Step 1. Brain dump tomorrow's top 3 priorities onto a piece of paper so those anxious thoughts don't keep you awake. Step 2. Physical prep. Lay out your clothes, set up the coffee maker. Just remove that decision fatigue for your future morning self. And step 3, a wind-down ritual. Enable night mode on your devices, literally put the phone in another room, and read a book instead.
And once you're actually in bed, aiming for 7 to 9 hours of sleep is the absolute foundation of this entire system. Let's be clear, sleep is not a sign of laziness. It is the critical period when your brain repairs cellular damage, consolidates your memories, and physically prepares you to win the next day. You have to protect it fiercely.
Which brings us to section 5, the weekly review and measuring what actually matters.
To keep this whole daily system on track, and to make sure you aren't quietly slipping back into those old habits, we need to zoom out a bit. Sit down once a week for a really quick 15-minute practice and ask yourself these 5 things. What were your 3 most memorable moments? When did you mindlessly scroll, and what uncomfortable feeling were you avoiding right then? Which of those micro-adventures actually worked for you? What do you want more of next week? And finally, what new thing will you try? Doing this just keeps you constantly exploring and tracking your real-world engagement.
And finally, section 6, building your identity and the compound effect.
This is really where we transition from these smart, small daily tactics to a profound, fundamental shift in who you are. Consider this idea. Every single choice is a vote for the person you are becoming. If you just view yourself as a person who's trying to scroll less, you're going to be fighting a constant uphill battle of resistance. But every single micro-adventure you take, every restorative break you choose, is an active vote. You are actively building undeniable proof of a totally new identity.
Just think about the massive power of the compound effect here. One single session of morning pages might feel like absolutely nothing in the moment. But do it for 30 days? That results in 90 pages of cleared mental space. That kind of accumulation fundamentally changes your relationship with yourself over time. You're building character muscle, and that dictates who you ultimately become. Because ultimately, boredom isn't a feeling, it's a choice. You possess the power to choose active engagement over passive distraction. By implementing these routines, you're building a life that is simply too rich, too vibrant, and too interesting to scroll through.
So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to ponder. The digital algorithms out there will always be mathematically optimized to capture your attention. They are literally engineered to win. But your life, that is the one variable you actually control. The question isn't whether you can simply beat the phone through sheer willpower. The real question is, what will you choose to build instead? The choice is entirely yours.